We do. So we engineered the virus. We've got our own special brand that if you give doxycycline, the antibiotic, the virus is engineered to respond to the drug, to turn on the genes. And then when you take it away from the mice, they just drink the water with doxycycline, it switches off. And the same can be done for the patients that we hope to treat. So you could imagine that the doctor gives the injection in the eye to the glaucoma patient, take these antibiotics for 3 weeks, come back, we'll measure your eyesight. And then if it's restored enough, you stop taking the antibiotic. But what gets interesting is if your eyesight ages again and you lose your eyesight, you just take another course of antibiotics and you just repeat that process as many times.
To activate that pathway.
Right. We don't know how many times you can reset the system. It could be once, it could be 50 times. I would say that it's going to be more than once for sure. You ask yourself, what are the chances of it doing harm? And if it's almost zero, then you look at the cost of the medicine, and if it's cheap, the downsides are really low and the upsides are potentially high. The real risk, I mean, let's be honest, the real risk is aging itself. It's going to happen. There's no denying it. And for most of us, it's not pretty what happens. And so then when you balance those up, you know, it's almost obvious to me that these risks are worth taking. But of course, you know, people have different tolerance for risk and don't all have access to scientific papers and can judge them.
But to be sure, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, it was what I think our segue was, that exercise is also a powerful activator of the AMP kinase pathway.
Well, it is, and that's a relatively safe way to do it. It's not risk-free either, right? I've had a couple of friends die from infarctions recently that overstress their bodies, we think, to do that. But yeah, if you do moderate exercise and you do it over long periods of time, your risk of mortality goes down dramatically. There's one study where people who cycled a lot, and the number, David, I can't remember exactly, but it was quite a lot, let's say 40 miles a day, something like that. Their risk, overall mortality risk, went down by 40% in their later decades, which is a remarkable benefit. So yeah, I mean, if you're not interested in pharmaceuticals or supplements, exercise and fasting are two, I wouldn't say easy, but relatively available things you can do. But you want to start before you become frail, of course, because it's very hard to do this once you've lost your muscle mass.
How do we look at that? What's your take on that? Because, I know that you are exercising, you are restricting your caloric intake, you're reducing your number of feedings. I hate to say that, as a laboratory animal per day, or how often you eat.
Yeah.
I think you're probably paying good attention to your sleep. And so where does one find that balance? I mean, I know you know James Clement. He wrote a wonderful book called The Switch. We had him on the program. And it's really talking about that pivot point. Where do we determine that?
Well, there's no one size fits all. It's why in my book and in my life, I turn to devices like the one I'm wearing on my wrist. It's an Apple Watch, but there are plenty of others. I also have a ring, the Oura ring, O-U-R-A. And I also occasionally take blood tests and look at what's happening to my body, particularly if I change my lifestyle. I want to know what's happening. Otherwise, I'm flying blind and I don't know if I'm doing harm or good to my body. But I measure about 34 things. In full disclosure, that the company that I use, I'm an advisor to, but I want to mention it because I think your listeners will want to know what I do. It's called Inside Tracker, and it's a Boston-based company. And I've got 11 years of data on my body for these markers, and I can estimate my biological age relative to other people. But also I can see when things are starting to trend up with age or lifestyle, and I correct them as best I can. And so far, I've been able to keep my estimated biological age younger than I otherwise would be. Now, this is different than the Horvath clock, which I haven't measured yet, but I will.
Oh, I bet you're dying to do that.
Well, I'm a little bit worried that I'm going to get a bad result, but I want to do it.
You have to tell us, though.
Of course I will. I'm a scientist. I'll tell everybody. The other reason, David, that I'm a little bit hesitant is a colleague of mine took 2 tests from 2 different companies and got an 8-year difference in the answer. So I'm waiting to see where it falls and which one is proven more accurate, and then I'll do it, because I don't want a false reading and then either get
Well,
something.
I think it does
well,
kind of point to the accuracy of the various available now so-called Horvath, or at least DNA methylation tests that are out there. And, you know, again, Dr. Horvath has been noted to indicate that his methylation measurements and that patterning, which there now are several. He has one called the Grim Age, which kind of predicts when we're going to die. That was named after the Grim Reaper, but that it's been sort of inviolate, at least for those of us who are in shape. He did indicate that there is an impact of lifestyle changes in people who are overweight or have diabetes. There was one recent publication, I believe it was last year in October, looking at overweight African Americans, and the only intervention in those who had low vitamin D levels was to, at various levels, replete their vitamin D. I think it was 600 up to 2,000 IU a day, and demonstrated, in fact, changes in, I think it was the velocity or the rate of change of the Horvath clock, or it may have been the delta between chronologic versus age versus the Horvath age. But, you know, really interesting information there that, you know, in moving forward, I think it's going to be really terrific that we can apply that information to ourselves. I want to get back to knowing about yourself. You are the N of one, and I've been speaking to our viewers for quite some time about what I learned in the morning when I wake up and have on my Aura ring. And we did a nice interview with the founder of that company. What I learned about last night's sleep. Was it restorative? Did I get enough deep sleep? Did I have enough time in REM? Did I have enough total sleep? And then tweaking modifications for me as the N of one. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. We recognize how you've talked about today, how important knowing your blood sugar is, and how the choices that I make in terms of my diet, my periodicity of eating, my how I honor my chronobiology in terms of when I eat, and how that affects my blood sugar. And I am, full disclosure, an advisor to a company called Levels Health that, while they don't provide the continuous glucose monitor, they then deal with the data and give you good information about changes that you can make. And then, you know, laboratory studies that are really generally available. I mean, I think it's really valuable to know markers of inflammation, your hemoglobin A1C, and your uric acid level. I think in moving forward, we're going to hear a lot more about the relationship between elevation of uric acid and many of these downstream effects that we talk about in terms of inflammation and metabolic disease. But, you know, as we close, we've covered a lot, and I would like to just ask you, as you're falling asleep at night, imagining where the future takes us in terms of where you are right now, especially as it relates to this incredible study that you just published. And I will say, you know, the press took your study and said, you know, laboratory reverses vision loss in laboratory animals. Really, I think perhaps missing the point that you revealed that mammals retain the information about being young and having vitality again, that it's all still there. And that, you know, your metaphor of it's there on the DVD, but it is just scratched over time, and that you're able to buff the DVD and allow us to listen to this incredible music of youth and vitality again, that it's there within each and every one of our cells. And that, you know, to me represents the incredible, you know, empowerment of where this may go. So let's say we play it forward in an ideal world that you have this, keep this incredible laboratory, unlimited funding. Where could we be, let's say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, so I was hoping in my career that we would help our children and our grandchildren, but things have gone so quickly. It's really a pleasure to be alive right now and honored to be part of this. I think about it a lot, David, of course. What I did as soon as we made this discovery was to think about how can we apply this. And I've spent some of my career doing clinical trials, starting biotech companies. Because we treated the eye, we could immediately imagine treating glaucoma. And so we're working towards that. So in the near term, I'm hoping that we'll be able to use the AAV, the adeno-associated virus technology, to, for the first time, restore vision in patients with glaucoma. Right now, there's nothing that you can do to reverse the disease. Very poor prognosis. Perhaps macular degeneration, perhaps damage to the optic nerve, maybe spinal injury could be reversed. But you're right. I'm glad you picked up on that, because it was surprising that the media didn't really grasp what I think is the main discovery here, which is that all cells in the body seem to have this ability to reset, not to zero, because that would just be fairly easy, but getting them back to being young, but not so young that they're dysfunctional. How do cells know how to do that? Where is that information to be young again? Where is that stored? That's still a mystery. But I can tell you there are a lot of scientists now who are searching for it. And when we find it, it's going to be a big deal. I hope that within our lifetime, we see this explode, and that we'll be able to treat many different diseases of aging. You could reverse the age of your heart. You're heading for heart failure. You turn the age of the heart back to 30 or 20. Ultimately, where this is going, I think maybe in our lifetimes, maybe for our children, is to reset the age of the body, whether it's with gene therapy or perhaps one day just a pill that you take for a few weeks. You wind the clock back, and your body isn't just acting young, it literally would be young. And if you have a young body, you don't get heart disease, you don't get Alzheimer's. There was a recent study by my colleague Manuel Serrano who reprogrammed the brain of old mice and got neurogenesis and memory back. These are things that I hope we'll be able to achieve. Now, just in case it's not clear, we have to be very careful, because if you go too far and too quickly, you can cause problems, you can cause cancer even. But we were very lucky with our treatment. These 3 genes, even though we pumped the mouse full of them, either just in the eye or the whole mouse, there was no sign over a year of any increased cancer. So we think we've just lucked out and found what is this ancient reprogramming mechanism that probably helps one of these salamanders regrow a limb, or helps our liver regrow the rest of the liver if you cut a piece out, and regrow the optic nerve if you do what we did.